Hearts of Stone, a modern interpretation of the old Polish tale of Pan Twardowski set in the Witcher's universe. While short, gives us a fantastic villain in the form of Gaunter O'Dim. Gaunter is my favorite video game villain of all time, so let's not waste any time getting right into his story.
What demon?
Feigned ignorance. Please, you know. Gaunter O'Dim. Evil incarnate.
Gaunter O'Dim's existence dates back thousands of years, across many cultures with as many names, but all of them tie back to one name: Evil Incarnate. He has a true name, although all who learned it are dead or worse. He acts by forming pacts with his victims that seem harmless at first, but drive them all to madness eventually. There are no known ways to kill him, although there is a story of someone who managed to dissolve his pact. Gaunter loves playing games, and so by challenging him to a game and winning, one man was supposedly able to escape from his pact. However, Gaunter only cares for one thing, and so he will only ever play for one stake: your soul.
What do you do? Who are you?
A mangy vagrant. Gaunter O'Dim, at your service.
We are first introduced to Gaunter very early on in the base game, during the main quest, Lilac and Gooseberries, where he offers to provide Geralt with information to aid in his search for Yennefer. He doesn't ask for anything in return, but simply states that perhaps one day he'll be in trouble and Geralt will be nearby to help. He's referred to once more in the base game, during the epilogue. Geralt can find the dwarves from the Isle of Mists, who mentioned that they stole a chalice and sold it to someone named
Mr. Mirror, was it? Funny name.
In the second expansion, Blood and Wine, we come across a woman named Marlena, who was suffering from a curse that had transformed her into a spotted white.
None shall sit and dine with you at your table. No spoon you have shall sate you. Never again shall you wish to spy your reflection in the mirror.
One evening while hosting a party for some friends, a beggar showed up with a bowl and spoon. Not caring for old customs, Marlena shooed the man away, claiming that she would rather give the leftovers to her dogs than to the beggar. The beggar then snapped his spoon, casting a curse on Marlena. As she was beautiful, she'd no longer wish to gaze upon herself in the mirror. She enjoyed feasts, so she'd never have anyone to sit and dine with her. And as she turned him away when he was hungry, no spoon would ever be able to sate her hunger. The beggar is never named, but a letter found in her estate talks about her encounter, saying that the only identifying thing that she could remember was that he sold mirrors. And when Geralt explains the situation to his major domo, we can hear the theme for Hearts of Stone's final quest, Whatsoever a Man Soweth, playing in the background, heavily implying that the beggar was Gaunter O'Dim.
It's about a man, worse than most. A vulgar, despicable man with a heart of stone. A man who refuses to pay his debts.
Moving on to the first expansion, Hearts of Stone, we're introduced to Gaunter O'Dim's current dilemma. Gaunter had been summoned by a man, Olgierd von Everec, who wished to make a contract to help him win back the love of his life, Iris. Gaunter grants him riches and immortality, but there would be a catch. He would have to sacrifice one of those close to him, his beloved Iris or his brother Vladimir, and Olgierd would choose to sacrifice Vladimir. He would go on to marry Iris, but the day after forming the contract, Gaunter would arrange Vladimir's untimely end. Immortality for Olgierd was a double-edged sword. When you're not afraid of anything, you have to keep chasing wilder and more extreme sensations, and eventually reach a point where you're jaded enough that nothing will satisfy you anymore. Olgierd's heart hardened over time until he became known as the man with a heart of stone.
It's wonderful at the start. You feel no fear, no angst, but also no concern, no care for anyone, not even those you loved.
The hardening of Olgierd's heart had bled into all aspects of his life. Iris was falling out of love with him, her family continuously disapproved of his actions, and he wasn't even sure how to love her back. He could only remember that he should love her. Regretting entering his pact, he approaches a man named Shakeslock to see if he could do some research into Gaunter O'Dim for him. He revealed everything to Shakeslock, including the sacrifice that he had to make, in hopes of Shakeslock being able to find some way out. Shakeslock uncovers a bit of Gaunter's backstory, which I went over earlier, and importantly for Olgierd, discovers a potential way out of Gaunter's pact. Gaunter became aware of Shakeslock's investigations and paid him a visit, claiming that he was flattered by all the attention. He gave the professor some repayment for his work by drawing a circle around him, telling Shakeslock that he'd be safe as long as he was inside it. Outside the circle, however,
If you'd heard how he said it, you'd be as certain as I am what leaving would bring.
with this new knowledge, Olgierd tries to reach out to get Gaunter to cancel the pact, even researching goetic summoning rituals to attempt to bring him out. His attempts at summoning Gaunter would end poorly, as the magic he was calling would start a house fire. Feeling like he was out of options, Olgierd would leave Iris with only a cat and dog to replace his presence, that Geralt suspects were lesser demons that he had managed to summon.
And thus I lived until I ceased to feel anything at all.
Enter Geralt. Geralt takes on a contract from Olgierd to kill a monstrous frog inhabiting the Oxenfurt sewers. But unbeknownst to him, this frog is actually an Ophiri prince, and upon slaying the beast, Geralt is apprehended and taken prisoner by some Ophiri and placed on a ship back to their land to be executed.
Greetings, Geralt. Remember me?
On the boat, Gaunter O'Dim appears to Geralt and offers to help him out of his situation, but this time expects Geralt to do him a favor in return. He has Geralt agree to meet him at midnight at the crossroads near Yantra, and brands Geralt's face, ensuring that he will hold up his part of the deal. Shortly after, the Ophiri ship would be torn apart by a particularly nasty storm, freeing Geralt from his imprisonment.
True. I'd much rather tell you about an individual of interest to us both. It's about a man, worse than most. A vulgar, despicable man with a heart of stone. A man who refuses to pay his debts.
At the crossroads, Gaunter O'Dim reveals his task to Geralt. He wants Geralt to help him collect his debt from Olgierd von Everec. Olgierd owed Gaunter his soul as part of their pact, but was refusing to pay up. One of the conditions for collecting Olgierd's soul was that Gaunter had to have a proxy fulfill 3 of Olgierd's wishes, and Gaunter had chosen Geralt as his proxy. To make Geralt a little more enthusiastic about the task, Gaunter tells him that he too had been wronged by Olgierd.
Olgierd von Everec did willfully and maliciously conspire to cause you to kill a man who might have been cured. Had I not intervened, you would have lost your head for this.
He tempts Geralt with promises of all sorts of fine wares that he has acquired over his time as a merchant. Geralt is hesitant, but is eventually convinced by Gaunter to meet up with him at Olgierd's mansion, after Gaunter tends to some other unspecified matter. Geralt requests to have his facial mark removed, but Gaunter leaves it there as collateral to ensure Geralt completes his task.
I believe, however, that all will end well. And once it does, We three shall meet and thank one another for the voyage we shared.
Remember that.
A man must display some madness from time to time. Helps him feel alive. Dare say you know what I mean, judging by the mark on your face.
Geralt arrives at the mansion slightly before Gaunter, and immediately Olgierd recognizes the markings on his face. He's not completely certain, but has strong suspicions about where the brand came from, and tells Geralt that he's chosen to deal with a dangerous man. Geralt confronts Olgierd about the Ophiri Prince, and Gaunter strolls up to chime in on the conversation.
Gaunter O'Dim. Come to cast aspersions?
No. I've come to collect a debt.
He reminds Olgierd of their contract and presents Geralt as his proxy to grant the 3 wishes. Gaunter is then dismissed, so Olgierd can speak to Geralt alone about the wishes. Olgierd gives Geralt his first 2 wishes, which are to be so impossible that Geralt could not possibly grant them, but try his best and he should be absolved of his debt. Bring Olgierd the house of Maximilian Borsodi, and show his brother Vladimir a good time. Geralt muses about how to bring Olgierd the house, thinking it to be the more difficult of the tasks. But if you remember from earlier, Olgierd sacrificed his brother Vladimir as part of his pact. As he's thinking over things, Gaunter pops out from behind a tree to offer some advice. Geralt thought Gaunter wasn't allowed to help, but Olgierd's contract only stopped Gaunter from granting the wishes himself, saying nothing about aiding the process. He directs Geralt in the right direction for both of Olgierd's wishes. Borsodi has ties to the auction house in Oxenfurt, so investigating there with plenty of coin would be a good idea, and a blood summoning should be enough to call upon the soul of Vladimir to show him a good time. He tosses Geralt a vial of von Everec blood to perform the ritual with, and suggests Geralt check in with his friend Shawnee for ideas on where Vladimir might be buried. Gaunter can be seen multiple times while granting the first 2 wishes, as if he's supervising Geralt to ensure he does his job. While Vladimir is inhabiting Geralt's body to be shown a good time, Gaunter approaches him and hints that Olgierd has a very surprising secret that he may reveal one day, of course talking about the circumstances of Vladimir's death. Following Geralt's completion of the 3 wishes, he returns to the inn in Oxenfurt, looking for Olgierd's men to pass on the message that the wishes had been granted. But sitting at the table in the corner is Gaunter. He calls Geralt over, but Geralt is cut off by a drunk looking for someone to drink with. Gaunter reaches the limit of his patience and claps twice, causing time to freeze. Geralt asks Gaunter who he is, who he really is. Gaunter simply responds with, "I give folk what they ask for." He denies Geralt the knowledge of his true identity, as everyone who has learned his true name is now dead or worse, and he still needed Geralt. With the 3 wishes now granted, Geralt requests the branding on his face be removed. However, Gaunter reveals that as per the fine print, there was still one more task that Geralt owed him.
Recall that I said, and I quote, "I believe, however, that all will end well, and once it does, we 3 shall meet and thank one another for the voyage we shared." End quote.
Geralt's last task was to lure Olgierd to the Temple of Lilvani, and then Gaunter would finally hold up his end of the deal and remove Geralt's brand. He concludes their meeting and begins to leave the bar, but not before punishing the man who had interrupted him and Geralt earlier. He takes a wooden spoon and pushes it all the way through the man's eye before leaving and unfreezing time. Geralt follows behind him, telling one of Olgierd's men to inform Olgierd of the upcoming meeting. And also, he doesn't brutally murder or traumatize somebody on his way out. Before heading to the temple, Geralt can talk to Shawnee, who suggests he check in with Professor Shakeslock, where he learns about the one known method of escaping a pact with Gaunter O'Dim. By challenging him to a duel of wits or word traps, he's likely to accept, but only if you wager the one thing he cares about.
There is only ever one stake. The sole thing he truly desires. Human souls.
Geralt and Olgierd meet at the temple, where he hands Olgierd evidence of the third wish being completed. With Olgierd now aware that his wishes have been granted, Gaunter O'Dim makes his entrance to collect Olgierd's soul. Olgierd reminds him of the terms of the pact, that a proxy would have to grant 3 wishes and that they stand together on the moon. Gaunter blows away the sand covering the design of the temple floor, revealing a crescent moon built into the architecture.
What? No. We had a pact. The moon is there. There! Not here.
I gave you what you wished for. Here, on the moon, our contract you fulfilled.
Awesome. You cheated me.
I never cheat.
Geralt now has the opportunity to make one of 2 choices. Let Gaunter claim Olgierd's soul, or use the knowledge he gained from Shakeslock and wager his soul in a game against Gaunter. If Geralt stays out of it, Gaunter claims Olgierd's soul and stays true to his word about offering a reward to Geralt. To be as swift as the wind, a special saddle for Roach, comparison of Lament. Never want to go hungry again, an endless supply of food, horn of plenty, a bottle of vodka that's always full, infinite alcohol for refilling your potions, bottomless carafe. Make me rich, 10,000 crowns, simple enough. Don't want anything from you? Nothing, I don't know what you expect. Want to know where Ciri is? Only available before the Isle of Mists, but some things are beyond Gaunter's power. After granting Geralt his reward, Gaunter mentions he isn't sure about his next destination, but if he needs help collecting a debt, he'll be sure to turn to a witcher, before whistling a tune as he walks away. Alternatively, Geralt can intervene, beginning a game for his soul. Gaunter takes Geralt into a new dimension and gives him one task. Solve a riddle to find Gaunter before the sand in his hourglass runs out.
To all things and men I appertain, and yet by some am shunned and disdained. Fondle me and ogle me till you're insane, but no blow can harm me, cause me pain. Children delight in me, elders take fright, fair maids rejoice and spin. Cry and I weep, yawn and I sleep, smile and I shall grin.
Gaunter's dimension has many traps, illusions, and red herrings all over the place. He taunts Geralt with an illusion of Shani falling to her death, tempts him with a cave full of treasure, attacks him with shadows of various monsters, and baits him with wrong ideas for what the answer to his riddle might be. Geralt eventually comes across a mirror in the mansion at the back of the realm, and deduces the answer to Gaunter's riddle is a reflection. The mansion is home to many mirrors, but each of them shatters as Geralt gets near, forcing Geralt to find some other way. If Geralt fails to solve the riddle within the time limit, Gaunter sneaks up behind him and absorbs his soul.
Before we go, some advice. Beware of the one called the Man of Glass. Stand in his way, and you'll meet a fate worse than death. Seek salvation in glass that can't be broken.
The dog that Olgierd had summoned for Iris had left Geralt with one piece of advice that comes into play here. If Gaunter is breaking all the mirrors, then Geralt will just have to find an unbreakable mirror. He finds a dried-up fountain with a damaged wall next to it. Breaking the wall causes water to come pouring out, filling up the fountain. As water isn't able to be shattered, Geralt is able to reveal Gaunter O'Dim in his reflection and banish him, winning the game for both his and Olgierd's soul.
Gotcha.
Be gone. You've lost.
The story for Hearts of Stone is inspired by the Polish tale of Pan Twardowski, with Olgierd taking on the role of the titular character who makes a deal with the devil, represented by Gaunter O'Dim. Both the devil and Gaunter form a contract claiming ownership of a man's soul, with specific conditions for the collection of the soul. In Twardowski's case, his soul was only to be taken during a visit to Rome, a city that he never intended to visit. And in Olgierd's case, his soul was to be claimed when he and Gaunter were standing together on the moon, which he obviously had no feasible way of making it to. The devil eventually catches Twardowski not in the city, but in an inn called Rome, which satisfies the letter of their contract, and Gaunter is able to trick Olgierd into meeting him on a mural of the moon to collect his soul. Looking at Gaunter as a stand-in for the devil, we can find a potential reference in his final lines after Geralt solves his riddle. The 3 lines are all spoken in different languages: Antillean Creole French, Georgian, and Ossetian, and it's the second line that I want to focus on. Having a stand-in for the devil speak in Georgian, albeit apparently with a misspelt word, might be a reference to the Charlie Daniels song "The Devil Went Down to Georgia." Another tie between Gaunter O'Dim and devils is in both cases where he unfreezes time, someone immediately mentions the word devil.
I heave like devils, make me stomach churn.
What the devil? Why is there a fly in my soup?
Additionally, looking at Gaunter O'Dim's initials, we can note a neat little juxtaposition to his representation as a devil. Writer Karolina Stachira describes the idea of Gaunter using spoons as the last thing you'd think of someone to use as a murder weapon. However, there does seem to be some inspiration from a couple pieces of Bulgarian folklore as well. Bulgarian ethnographer Dimitar Marinov has talked about spoons having a presence during incantations and magic, and were said to have protective powers. 3, 7, or 9 spoons gathered from separate homes could break the spells of evildoers, and shortly after giving birth, younger mothers were disallowed from leaving the house except if they carried certain charms with them. Among these charms, a wooden spoon tied with a red thread. Twice Gaunter O'Dim snaps a spoon to curse someone: Geralt on the ship, and Marlena the White from Blood and Wine. Snapping a wooden spoon could be symbolic of destroying these protective powers that they're said to have, allowing Gaunter's curses to infect their victim. Additionally, there is a demon existing in Bulgarian, Macedonian, and Serbian folklore called an Allah. They are known as demons of bad weather, and are said to create hail and thunderstorms, usually directed at farms or vineyards. Parts of Serbia depict the Allah as a monster with an enormous mouth and a big wooden spoon in her hand. Gaunter O'Dim is seen multiple times with a wooden spoon in hand, and he has demonstrated his ability to cause powerful thunderstorms to wreck a ship when he frees Geralt from his Ophiri captives. When forming his contract with Geralt, Gaunter asks Geralt to meet him at a crossroads to formalize the details. Crossroads play a heavy role in many cultures across the world, and are often associated with summoning demons or devils to grant wishes. The Transylvanian Essay from 1885 talks about how to summon a crossroads demon based on Romanian folklore. To summon a demon, you need to draw a circle on the ground at a crossroads, deposit a copper coin, and recite a chant. The devil would then be summoned, and you would have to stay in the circle until the devil completely disappeared, or else your soul would be lost. Faust, the titular character from the German legend that tells a very similar tale to Pan Twardowski, summons the demon Mephistopheles at a crossroad. They would form a contract where Mephistopheles would serve Faust until their contract was over, but in exchange, Faust would give up his soul after 24 years. Some more famous modern examples of crossroads devils are the blues musicians Robert Johnson and Tommy Johnson, who were said to have sold their souls to a crossroads devil in exchange for their musical talent. There are many deities associated with crossroads, and we'd be here all day if I went into details on all of them, so I'll just list some of them out here. Papa Legba from West African Vodun, Hecate from Greek mythology, Eshu Legba of the Yoruba religion, and Kalfu from Haitian voodoo. Gaunter brings his victims to enter a pact with him that seems harmless at first, but drives them to madness eventually. In Gaunter's words, he gives people what they ask for, nothing more, and any ill consequences are a result of their poorly formulated wishes, rather than any fault on his part. In other words, he gives them what they ask for, not what they want. There's an adage, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it, dating back to the Greek storyteller Aesop. Aesop is most known for his series of fables known as Aesop's Fables, and one of these fables in particular, The Old Man and Death, is relevant here. The fable tells of an old man who wishes the Grim Reaper Death would come for him. Death hears his call and shows up, and the old man, not actually wanting to die yet, panics and asks Death to help him carry some sticks. A notable modern example of this is the story The Monkey's Paw, a 1902 novel by English author W.W. Jacobs. The main character, Mr. White, comes into possession of a mummified monkey's paw, a cursed item said to grant 3 wishes, but with hellish consequences. Being £200 short of making the final mortgage payment on his house, Mr. White wishes for the money to finally deal with that. The next day, his son Herbert has an accident at work and is killed by one of the machines, and the company offers £200 to the family as a show of goodwill. A week after Herbert's funeral, Mrs. White begs her husband to wish for their son to come back to life. Later that night, a knock is heard at the door, and while Mrs. White is ecstatic at the thought of her son being alive again, Mr. White, traumatized by the result of the first wish, fears what he might have brought back with his second. As his wife is unlocking the door, he hastily grabs the paw to make his third and final wish, and the knocking ceases.
You must be careful what you wish for, lest your wish be granted, for there are consequences.
Gaunter O'Dim has a number of influences from modern pop culture, including Gustavo Fring from Breaking Bad, and 2 characters from Stephen King novels, Leland Gaunt and Randall Flagg. The scene in the Oxenfurt Inn where he shoves a spoon into a man's eye was inspired by a scene from Breaking Bad's Season 4 opening episode where Gus grabs a box cutter and slits Victor's neck. Similarly to how Gus comes across as someone who doesn't like to dirty his hands, Gaunter is much the same way, preferring to ruin lives indirectly or through packs or games. To quote the Eurogamer article interviewing Carolina Stachera, we're hardwired to think the devil has horns, and so it's deeply chilling when you see these normal-looking characters act in such extreme measures, as you know they're at the limits of their patience. Leland Gaunt is the main antagonist of King's novel Needful Things. He runs the titular shop in the town of Castle Rock, Maine, where he sells items perfectly suited to any customer who walks through the door. The cash prices are low, but in addition to money, each customer has to play a prank on someone else in the town. These pranks are chosen to exacerbate existing feuds, drive wedges into relationships, and drive the town into overall chaos. When someone dies as a result of these pranks, Gaunt claims their soul. Similarly, Gaunter doesn't care much for money. Gentlemen don't discuss coin, instead preferring payment in the form of favors and souls. Randall Flagg is an antagonist in several King novels, including The Stand and The Gunslinger. I'm no expert on Stephen King novels, and I am not about to read all of the novels that Randall is involved in just for this video. But as best as I can gather, Randall Flagg is the closest thing in King's novels to evil incarnate. One of the names he goes by in The Gunslinger is Walter O'Dim, which Gaunter's name obviously takes inspiration from. Gaunter O'Dim is also known as Master Mirror or the Merchant of Mirrors. There's lots of mythology and folklore surrounding mirrors, but we're going to be focusing on two customs about them. There's a Jewish custom that during Shiva, the week-long mourning period after the death of a loved one, all of the mirrors in the house are to be covered. There seem to be several factors contributing to this, one of them being a belief that the soul of the deceased could get trapped in an uncovered mirror. The Chinese practice of feng shui suggests that a mirror facing the bed can cause your soul to become trapped in it overnight. This stems from a belief that the soul leaves the body when you sleep, and similar to the Jewish custom, the belief that a soul may become trapped in an uncovered mirror. Gaunter O'Dim seems to want one thing: souls. We don't know exactly why, but it's very clear that their collection is his end goal. The name Master Mirror was given to him to reflect his soul-stealing nature, and mirrors are a focal point of the riddle that he gives Geralt in the game for Olgierd's soul. And speaking of the game for Olgierd's soul, the quest it's a part of, the final quest of Hearts of Stone, is called Whatsoever a Man Soweth, a reference to Galatians 6:7, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap," symbolizing karma, or the idea of you get what you give. Depending on Geralt's decision up on the moonlit altar, this could apply to either Olgierd or Gaunter, but seeing as how this video isn't exactly about Olgierd, we'll skip past that interpretation. In Gaunter's case, he's led a life of games, robbing people's souls through deceitful contracts, following the letter of their wishes rather than the spirit. Although it's not clear what exactly happens to Gaunter O'Dim, the journal entry merely states that he was driven from our dimension, but could potentially return in the future. He was defeated for now, those games that he loves so much being his undoing. As I mentioned in the intro, Gaunter O'Dim is my personal favorite video game villain of all time. Despite not getting tons of screen time, as Hearts of Stone is a fairly short expansion, there's just something about the way that he's presented that makes him such an intriguing character to me. He's introduced to the player right at the start of the base game, pointing us to where we might find Yennefer, and then foreshadowing his return.
We men of the road must stick together. Perhaps one day I'll be in trouble and you'll be nearby to help.
This initial interaction, although brief, does a very good job of introducing us to Gaunter. It sets up some of his mystery by mentioning some of his titles, Master Mirror, Man of Glass, and demonstrates some resourcefulness as he knows of both Geralt and Yennefer, as well as some of Yennefer's recent destinations. His goodbye does a good job setting us up for his appearance in Hearts of Stone. For someone who claims to be a merchant, he surprisingly doesn't demand any payment for the service he gave us. Instead, he gives Geralt this favor as collateral to make it harder for Geralt to refuse to lend his aid in the future. He says perhaps, but this is a little bit misleading, as he's already decided to call upon Geralt for help at a later date. Gaunter very rarely likes to handle things directly, often leaving breadcrumbs for someone to follow or achieve his results in a roundabout way. Going back to meeting him in White Orchard, he doesn't directly tell us where Yennefer is, but points us to the commander of the garrison whom she had talked to recently. When we're imprisoned on the Ophiri ship, He doesn't simply break us out, he summons a storm to destroy the ship. When we need help figuring out Olgierd's first 2 wishes, he sorts us out and provides us with the necessary materials to summon Vladimir's spirit, before telling us to bug off and do our own research to where he might be buried. And this makes the scene in the Oxenfurt Inn so much more powerful. It subverts our expectations and shows us a different Gaunter than we've seen so far. Gloves off, no tricks, no riddles, just a frustrated Gaunter having a straight conversation with Geralt where he actually says what he means. We see just how dangerous Gaunter truly is as he shows us what he's capable of when he's at his wit's end. He reveals that, much like his first introduction, his words have meaning as he springs the fine print on Geralt.
Recall that I said, and I quote, "I believe, however, that all will end well, and once it does, we 3 shall meet and thank one another for the voyage we shared." End quote.
Gaunter doesn't just say this for fun, and he slips it into the conversation so naturally that you don't even notice, but as I just mentioned, his words have meaning. When Gaunter says something, it's not merely a suggestion or a prediction, it's a fact. The scene ends with Gaunter taking out his frustrations on the drunkard who had interrupted him and Geralt when Geralt first walked in.
That was the last time you interrupted me while I was talking to someone.
This is what all of the tension of the scene and the entire DLC so far, really, has been building up to. So far, Gaunter has only been acting indirectly, manipulating events behind the scenes, but we finally see him take some direct action here. Frustrated with Olgierd for refusing to hold up his end of the contract, frustrated with the drunkard for apparently interrupting him too many times, he finally snaps and directly kills someone. Think back to being young and seeing a parent or a teacher snap and scream at someone. You're now afraid to risk provoking them further lest you suffer their wrath next. And that's exactly what happens with Gaunter O'Dim here. He's done toying around and doesn't care about maintaining his image. He wants Olgierd's soul, and he wants it now. Gaunter O'Dim's role in the world of The Witcher is an enigma. He's clearly incredibly powerful, as his abilities include control over time, summoning storms, being visible to the blind, granting wishes, claiming souls, and I'm sure some others. Nobody has been able to fully document his identity. He has tons of analogs in real-life folklore that I've gone into already, but not all of those might necessarily apply in the world of The Witcher. Instead, only small scraps from throughout history have been gathered on him. Professor Shakeslock mentions he exists in many cultures under many names, and this is actually brought up again much more subtly if Geralt beats Gaunter to save Olgierd's soul. The final lines spoken by Gaunter, roughly translating to, "You are insignificant, you think you've defeated me, but you are wrong, I can't be killed, I will be back," are spoken in 3 different languages, none of which we see spoken by anyone in The Witcher 3, demonstrating that he has in fact been around for a while and interacted with many different cultures. He does, however, have one name that follows him everywhere: Evil Incarnate. Gaunter is self-serving and doesn't care about the well-being of anyone who enters contracts with him. He's aware the wishes he grants are often not what was truly desired, or may have unforeseen consequences, but he doesn't care, and lets people unwittingly enter these doomed contracts. He only seems to desire one thing: souls, although to what end is unclear. Killing him seems impossible, and prior to Geralt, only one man had ever managed to escape from a contract with Gaunter with his soul intact. He stuffs hidden clauses into his contracts and relentlessly hunts down anyone who refuses to pay their debt. He doesn't care about catching others in the crossfire when granting wishes, and instead goes with methods he deems fun. And most of all, he's terrifying. We're never shown what his greater motive is, or if he even has one, which makes his particular brand of evil that much more terrifying. For all we know, he might just be doing this entirely for fun. You have to pay extra close attention to the fine print. You never know what might set him off. You might end up a random casualty for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or he might just give you exactly what you wish for and let you suffer the consequences, such as having a heart of stone. His characterization is so strong that even though his name is never mentioned during Blood and Wine, it's incredibly obvious that he was the one who cursed Marlena. The association with spoons, the mention of mirrors, a Hearts of Stone song playing while Geralt's explaining what happened. His name doesn't need to be said for us to know that he was responsible, and that's just how memorable his character was. And everything that we just mentioned, that's how he truly earns his title of Evil Incarnate, and the honor of being my favorite video game villain of all time.